Good evening. We're not quite quorate yet. We're just waiting for seeing Councillor Keynes. Thank you.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. With members and officers, please remember to switch their microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone, and please switch them off when you're finished talking. Any officers called upon by the portfolio holder should address ignore that bit. Switch off mobile phones or place them on silent. And if you need to take a call, please leave the room. That's not for members, that's for any members of the public attending and officers. So moving on to tonight's meeting. Any apologies for absence?
No apologies have been received, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so do members have any comments, or are we all in agreement with the minutes from the 12th of January? Yep, that's agreed. Thank you. Section 106? No? Okay. Disclosures of interest. I have a disclosure of interest on item agenda. Well, it's 7 on the agenda pack, but I am going to be moving things around today, which is a taxi and private hire licensing policy. So my father is a black cab Hackney carriage driver, but I do not have any financial gain or any financial support from my father, but I do live in the same address as him. So I'm not sure if I need to leave the room or if I am able to stay.
I believe you're able to stay, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mead.
Apologies for lateness. I've been approached by taxi people with a query looking for clarification on one of the bits on taxi and licensing, etc. No connections. I haven't been offered free taxi rides or anything. So
Fine, you're able to take part in debate and vote if needed. Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Mahmood Hussain.
Not really. We all got getting correspondence. Recently, I've attended meeting with the taxi driver, with the leader of the council and other members. So that is quite a norm. I've done that for 40 years. So that's part of the being a councillor, is to have a member with a trade. So I had a communication, and so did many members.
Thank you. Has that been noted? Perfect. Moving on, any urgent business?
None received. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I believe you do have a reference from committee and other body. Would you like to update us, if that's okay?
Thank you, Chair. It was an update rather than, Chair, an actual reference. It was back last year. A reference came from this committee to Children's Scrutiny Review Group about education psychologists and the recruitment. A report went to Children's and it was noted, and they're going to just keep an eye on this if anything comes of it, if there's continued problems. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the update, and the update is noted. Thank you. Right, moving on to reports, and I'm going to be shuffling things around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is the casual vacancy, I'm going to move up to take the item first tonight. Then I'll be taking the scale of charges, which is item agenda 8, it stays there, and then I'll take your item, Tony, if that's all right. So, Debbie James, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for taking this item first. A very short report. Its purpose is set out at paragraph 1. We need the committee, please, to declare a vacancy in Widmore Ward in accordance with section 86 of the Local Government Act 1972 for the reasons set out at paragraph 4.
Thank you. Any questions or queries? Yes, Councillor Nasser.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just I read actually 2 days ago, so that's why I'm not clear what it is. So I just want to find out whether on this situation, do we, I mean, from as a authority, do we, what's the procedure? Do we like give them a warning or remind them with letters, and then how does it take? So
The situation is that a councillor failed to attend meetings for 6 consecutive months. So we're in a position now where this committee, under the rules, the law requires that the committee declare a vacancy and then we proceed to a by-election.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Nasser.
because what I'm thinking, because this just came, and that's why we, as a councillor, we are just are able to know this the procedure. So that's why, I mean, for the safe side, I mean, why there is no policy that, you know, giving a warning or reminding them this is the policy.
The policy is if a councillor doesn't attend meetings for 6 months, then we can go ahead with this. Is that right, Debbie? Would you like to clarify that?
That's correct, Chair. The law requires it. If that situation occurs, we have no option other than to proceed in accordance with the law that's set out in the legal implications. But are you asking whether there's a mechanism to flag up if this is a possibility? Yes. There is going to be a more formal process coming forward to help councillors be warned if this is nearing a 6-month period, and we're going to bring that into effect.
Thank you. Any other further questions or queries? No. Okay, so in that case, the committee does declare that a casual vacancy has written in Wigmore Ward. So that's...
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All done. Right, moving on to the scale of charges. Darren, I believe that's yours, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you tonight presents the outcome of the annual review of the Council's sales fees and charges proposals to be applied from the 1st of April 2026. The Council reviews its fees and charges annually for the services that it provides to ensure that charges are set wherever possible to fully recover the cost of providing those services, so that council taxpayers don't unduly subsidise services used by individuals or small groups. So our costs continue to rise, and the latest published inflation figure in December 2025 was 3.4%. In addition, the council has assumed a 3% staff pay award for 26-27. That's still to be agreed, so it could be lower, it could be higher. The proposed charges are listed in full in Appendix 1 to the report, which run from page 233 to page 255 of your papers. And I don't plan to go through those in any detail. The table in paragraph 11 of the report on page 228 shows that the council currently generates about £1.5 million from the fees and charges in front of you tonight, and that the increases should generate an additional 54,000 next year, which is an increase in yield of about 3.7%, and that will contribute towards the costs of providing those services. So a breakdown of that 54,000 is provided in Appendix A on page 232. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Nasser.
Just want a clarification, because we have seen a very small amount was increased compared to the previous year. But if you see page 250, which is about the licensing highway, so there is a, if you see the last time, it is a change of like £18 or something like that. I've seen that a couple of them are, on there. So why is that? It is 18.81%.
You're referring to the licensing highway fee for additional display of... that fee wasn't increased the previous year. So basically, we're trying to play a bit of catch up. So we've increased it by a bit more this year. That is a bit more, obviously quite a bit more than inflation. But that charge is generally payable by businesses rather than individuals.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, that's no questions. So the committee is recommended to approve. So I'm going to propose to approve the increase in the scale of charges. And I don't see any objections. So that's also gone through. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, moving on to taxi and private hire licensing policy. Tony Island, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So first, a little bit of an apology, I suppose, because actually some of you will have seen this in different forums in different ways as we've gone through the consultation period and the process. So apologies for that. But basically, the report is in before you with a recommendation at paragraph 2. Just to sort of, I'm not going to go through every paragraph here, but basically just to say the existing policy has been sort of piecemeal put together over the years. And this was an opportunity with the introduction of the statutory standards and the new best practice guidance from the government to bring in a new fresh looking policy, which hopefully is easier to read, easier to understand. And therefore we've actually drafted with the help of one of the industry leading experts, solicitors, Jim Button, to actually produce this 7-part policy document. Has been subject to quite a bit of consultation with the trade and with councillors and others and officers, but basically the whole the primary thrust of this is to actually bring make the policy reflect the key elements that were introduced in the statutory standards. So that includes bringing in the DBS update service, mandatory provisions for licensed drivers, which allows the authority to then to be able to undertake 6 monthly DBS checks. There's no additional demands on the driver. That is all done through an admin process internally. Provision of good certificates of good character for applicants who have spent an extended period of time outside the UK. Mandatory safeguarding training. Currently, we operate that on a voluntary basis. We want to move that to a mandatory provision. Provisions for language proficiency, driver proficiency, and then the introduction of DBS checks for vehicle proprietors where they don't hold a driver's license. There was also consideration of CCTV, and you'll see in the report that the general view through the consultation is that that can still be a voluntary arrangement. That would be a choice for drivers and owners to fit. And then also the introduction of DBS checks for private hire operators, individual companies or partnerships, and anybody involved in the booking and dispatch. That's all set out in the statutory standards. We already have some provisions for joint authorisation for officers across Bedfordshire. So therefore we would obviously looking to take that and formalise that as part of this policy. One of the elements that actually Luton was an early adopter was the mandatory use of the central database for refusals, revocations and suspensions, which is known as NR3S. But that then came into effect under a separate piece of legislation, the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Safeguarding and Road Safety Act 2022. So the policy, as I said, is split into 7 parts. The aim is that you'll be able to pick up each individual part dependent on the type of licensing. So whether you're a driver, whether you're a vehicle owner or whether you're an operator. There is the overarching policy, introduction of a new penalty point scheme. We've had the updated fitness and convictions policy. We've always had that. And then driver's policy and code of conduct, vehicle policy for both hackney carriages and private hire, and then private hire operators. I don't intend you to take you through each of the individual sections as such. That is all laid out from paragraph 16 and indicates all of the various changes, etc. One of the few things, well, a couple of key things that have come through, which have been put forward by the trade for quite a bit of time. One was tinted windows for private hire vehicles. The policy following the consultation has been drafted on the basis that there would be an increase in the level of tint allowed, and the policy wording has been constructed to reflect the fact that we will accept manufacturers' tints, although beyond a certain level, those vehicles will be expected to be used for executive use purposes only. That fits with the best practice guidance. CCTV, as I say, the general review coming back was to not mandate this, but make this a voluntary scheme as it is currently. policy has been drafted to reflect that point as well. Signage, really keeping the status quo, and the policy has been reflected to say that we will continue to use the existing provisions for vehicle signage. So those are the three key elements that certainly there was a lot of feedback on. As part of the consultation process, we did go out to the public, the trade and businesses. 258 responses were received. Unfortunately, 91 were of repeat or identical comments, which was a little bit unhelpful. However, we did receive some real useful comments within that. And the general support, as indicated in the way that we drafted the policy, was to approve or support the options regard to tinted windows, CCTV and signage, with between 68 and 73% in favour. We also held a separate meeting with the two trade associations, which had a 2.5-hour meeting with them where we ran through quite an extensive document responding to all their various points and made it clear whether it was introduced as it's going to be a Luton policy item, whether it was being introduced as statutory standards under the legislation or best practice guidance. And we gave that response then and there on the spot. If approved, then we would be indicating that there would be at least a 6-month transition process for us to bring all of the provisions in place. There would be some quick wins, so things like tinted windows could be introduced quite quickly. However, putting the provisions in for some of the other elements, such as the training and the penalty point scheme, might take a bit longer. So therefore, we were asking to make it clear that there would be at least a 6-month process to gradually bring all the various elements in. In addition, we would ask that there was also the ability for myself or other head of service for regulation to be able to update the policy with minor elements, but also we are expecting some changes to statutory regulations. You may have heard with regards to the move to licensing to transport authorities. Obviously, in effect, that doesn't change our position from a unitary authority, but all the references would change. We would cease to be referring to the licensing authority. We would be the transport authority. So again, I'd like permission to be able to, delegations to be able to make those changes. And then there's also, every so often, we will go to an element that doesn't sit within admin and regulations, such as for taxi fares and taxi ranks. That goes to executive. At the moment, we would have to bring those elements back and ask you to update the policy. Again, ask for delegations to be able to make those changes in line with the decision from executive. But also then we would like to introduce, as recommended by the statutory standards, to the inclusion of the replacement new bylaws. We have to go through a legal process with legal support for that. We have started the process, but that's yet to be completed. So again, we would like the provision to be able to, once they come through, is that to be able to replace that section in the policy with the new replacement bylaws. And it's also proposed that we would then look to review the policy in 5 years' time. That concludes my report. Thank you, Chair. So I'm available to take any questions. Oh, sorry. May I just add something? We have had some late points raised by the trade. I'm happy to go through those if that's felt to be useful, because I know some members had been copied into that. So we did give an assurance that actually, if necessary or required, I would be quite happy to provide the responses as part of the discussions this evening.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's helpful if you do provide the responses for that.
Do you like me to go through those to start off with?
Yes, please.
Certainly. So excuse me while I just bring up the right document.
Councillor Hussain, did you have a... Sorry, Tony.
Going to ask you that because this report obviously is, hundreds of pages, members that, like reading the Harry Potter, probably would be easier than reading this. So in that sense, members need to take time in this report, because one of the things that we remind, public safety to us is paramount, right? So there is no excuses for that. But in the legislation or the guidelines from the government, there are some things that are statutory, Chair, and there are those that are optional for local authority to adopt the local needs. Yeah. So if we can be, when you're recommending something, can you make sure that we would say this is the national guidelines, we have to do it, these are the ones that are optional and we could look at that. Yeah, so if you can point that out to us at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to say that actually the report has been structured on the basis to point out those key points, those key elements, apart from the way that we've restructured, are all to do with the statutory standards and the best practice guidance. So all of those points I've just gone through this evening with regards to the update and inclusion in the new policy are all to do with statutory standards. And then there's a few elements with regards to the best practice guidance.
That's fine, thank you. But I think it would be helpful to if you could reiterate which one is optional and which one is mandatory. Thank you. So yeah, floor is yours.
Thank you. Right, let me just bring up the right document. So do excuse me for a moment. There we go. So yes, some members will have received this email directly. So just like to go through. So there was a concern that through the consultation process, that the document had been restructured. I'm not quite sure where that comes from, because actually we consulted on a 7-part policy document. Obviously, you have a 7-part policy document before you. We haven't changed the structure. It's always been devised on the basis that actually, hopefully, this would be an easier policy to read, i.e. if you're a driver, you can just pick up the driver section. So I'm not quite sure what's being referred to, but only just to give the reassurance that we haven't changed the structure of the proposed policy from its point of consultation. There was also 2 points that were raised, the fact that we were adding to the policy. One was regards to the introduction of the credit card provisions and also the MOT certificate linked to the DVLA. At the moment, we have a certificate of compliance for vehicles. Unfortunately, because that's an enhanced test, we are unable to link that to the DVLA website. So therefore, for drivers or owners to get their vehicles taxed, or if they get pulled by the police, there's no obvious element on the database to say that that vehicle has had a test. One of the requests that came through the meeting was to have the MOT test linked to the first certificate of compliance, and therefore we've added both this element and the credit card payment in as a request from the trade. However, we've now had a query from the trade to say, why have you added them? So I'm not sure quite how that fits, but equally, if there is a key concern around that, I'm happy to remove those items from the policy. There was also points made, points discussed but not reflected in the revised consultation. Again, we made it very, very clear in the meeting that actually this policy does not change the council's constitution. So the elements regards to delegations remain the same. The policy can't change the constitution. If that was wanted, then that is a separate conversation. So therefore, again, we had reiterated that, and actually quite a few of these points raised by the trade ask for that. But as I say, that is a different conversation. I would like to just give the committee sort of a response with regards to the decisions. So in 2013, officers were delegated the powers to make decisions on the licenses. That was for a number of reasons, but it meant we could streamline, we could make faster decisions. But basically, we also then, at that time, we were looking to reduce resources and therefore keep the fees down. Since then, we've dealt with 143 either refusals, revocations or suspensions. Approximately about 50% of those are appealed by those that are subjected to those. And out of those, there were 5 cases where their appeal has been upheld. The circumstances for those was that one, the magistrates didn't believe the evidence as provided by the police. The other one was the driver's son changed their story. So you go, well, one or the other. So either, made one story for one judicial setting and not for the other. And then the other 3 were out of time. So basically, this was due to COVID. So actually, by the time the matter was brought to the magistrates' court, the matters for the reason why the licenses had been revoked or refused were out of time. So therefore, they were back in scope of the policy. So therefore, those appeals were upheld. At no time have we had any decisions awarding costs against the council for a bad decision. So I really wanted to stress that actually this does seem to be quite a thorough and accountable system, because not only are we accountable to yourselves, we're accountable to the senior management, and we're also accountable to the magistrates or the Crown Court as well. So actually, we we have to make sure that we're making the right decisions at the right time. If I then move on, if there's no particular questions on that one, raise the issue of DBS, the DBS enhanced checks. We did again liaise with the trade to say actually with the mandatory update service, that should remove a lot of the problems when we have delays with the police to doing the DBS update service, or the DBS check, should I say. The update service would allow us to be able to deal with that as an admin function. So if they keep that update service live, we can just do a fresh check against that original registration. That means that we don't get delays and we don't get any interruption of the license due to the fact that the DBS hasn't been released by the police, or the police are waiting for their response. Interestingly, we had a new point raised that they are requesting that we take back in the provisions to be able to undertake the DBS rather than using a third-party provider. Again, it might be outside of the scope for today because that's more of an operational provision. However, it's something that could be considered, but it does need to be borne in mind that if we were to do that, we would have to go out to contract. The costs for the contract would have to be reflected in the license fees. Also, the time for the admin for the licensing staff would have to be reflected, and again, would be in effect be an increase in the license fees, rather than the drivers going straight to the third party and paying a lower fee. But if it's felt that members wanted us to look at that, we could, of course, do that, but that's probably for another day. There are a couple of queries regards to the provisions around sort of convictions or totting up on the licence. Again, they're all part of the new statutory standards. That's what's being recommended that we adopt. And so that is in line with that. Same regards to handheld devices and mobile phones. They feel that the 5 years is disproportionate. Again, that's in line with the statutory standards. Suspension and revocation powers, we talked about that. Reference to speed awareness course, that is an admission of guilt. So therefore that fits within the other provisions regards to any warning or notice or anything else. It's not confidential and therefore should be disclosed to the licensing authority to be able to take it into effect or account. It's either or 3 points or, the training basically. Good character reference to make a good point. Actually, one of the sections still says 3 months. It should be 6 months, so we can make that amendment. So we've done that. Medical requirements, that was quite a considerable consideration with members in various forums. What's been put into the policy is what was being suggested through that consultation. So probably doesn't reflect quite what was being presented by the trade or what the trade wanted. CCTV and dash cams, we've got it's not a licensing requirement, it's actually a provision for the Information Commissioner's Office. Dash cams can be internal and external facing, or both. Therefore, they do capture personal data, therefore they should be registered when being used in a licensed vehicle. That's not our requirement, that's basically requirement in law, certainly to protect the owner or the driver from any false claims, etc., regards to data being held about personal and individuals' data. There's a section here about what they would like to see with regards to receipts. We have no issue with adding that in. And then again, there's a written record regards to the vehicle maintenance work and repair work. We would have thought that actually for tax purposes, those would be kept anyway. So I don't necessarily think that's a significant issue there. Again, no changes to delegations. Service history, we're not saying, and I say I've had conversations with members on this in other forums. We're not suggesting that they have to be manufacturers or particular providers. This is just basically keeping good records of the maintenance of the vehicle. It can be with any garage, any provider. It's just that if a vehicle continues to be presented in a bad condition or continues to fail a number of tests, actually we'd be looking for evidence to make sure that that vehicle is being properly maintained. So yeah, I can make that condition a little bit more clearer with regards to that it could be any garage. And then insurance write-offs. The facilities that we have at the depot So even if we take the vehicle for the enhanced certificate of compliance test, wouldn't pick up necessarily the structural damage for a vehicle or whether it's been, so that's why we have the provisions there that if the vehicle has been written off or would be considered a write-off, that given for public safety, we wouldn't be looking to license that vehicle, even though somebody privately may choose to take on that vehicle separately or buy it back from insurance. I think getting to the final points now. Plates, we already have a deposit process in place, so actually no change to policy there. And the point about the ranks, the provision for ranks sit predominantly with highways. If highways then put their powers in place, we then look to adopt where appropriate. So actually there is a discussion separately outside this meeting, probably with highways colleagues, to make sure that all of those locations are properly accessible, given that we have accessible vehicles. And the final point there is that the airport rank and Silver Street ranks aren't on the list for licensing adopted locations. That's because they're not adopted. The airport is a private rank, same as the stations. And likewise, Silver Street wasn't adopted because that was a trial provision with highways. If obviously that can go to executive to get that added to the list, but it's not been missed. And I think that covers all the points, if that helps, Chair. Sorry, it was a bit of a list.
That's fine. Thank you, Tony. Do members have any questions? Councillor Hussain?
I can I, for a start, you mentioned a number of things the trade has said, have a concern. My biggest concern is A, the cost of them, and B, the practicality of them. Yeah. Example is the service record. Yeah. I mean, we all, for the sake of the public, we do want it vehicle to be safe, and there is some sort of record. The difficulty in some cases is where the vehicles are hired from a hire company and they keep their record themselves. They don't give it because they claim the taxi. When they are, hiring it so much a week from each vehicle. Now, the driver does not have that. Now, how can we do that where if it's a vehicle is not owned by the driver, it is rented from somebody else, then we need to make some sort of arrangement so that that company keeps a record rather than the driver.
Certainly, Councillor, what I can advise is that's why it's unlisted under the proprietor section rather than the driver section. So basically it'll be the responsibility of the vehicle owner, the proprietor of that vehicle, to keep those records. It won't be incumbent on the driver to produce those. So it wouldn't matter whether it was an owner driver or whether it was a vehicle being hired from one of these large companies that hire out a number of different vehicles. I would have to say that actually the biggest problem that we have is with those companies regards to the standard of those vehicles. So actually that's been put in here to actually help try and address those issues. So there wouldn't be, the driver wouldn't be penalised with regards to not being able to produce those records, because actually the inquiry would be with the proprietor.
Yeah. And the second part of that is in terms of the vehicle when you buy it from the private sector. Nobody hands you in the service record of the vehicle anyway. So how the hell can you give you previous record of the vehicle when you put it in the trade?
So we would be looking at
the point I'm making is why are you putting these unnecessary conditions? Does it not in the real world, when you buy a vehicle, you don't get a service record unless it's from dealer?
No, again, what we'll be saying is whilst the period of the vehicle is licensed. So actually, if it's presented to us, obviously the first point, we would take it as is because it'll have its test.
Yes.
And then over the period of being licensed, we would expect that vehicle to be maintained. What shouldn't happen, so basically the vehicle should be able to be tested at any time and pass its test. And what tends to happen is that either for the 6 monthly that, there are occasions where owners will only prepare the vehicle when it's due for a test, which then makes us query what's happening with the vehicle and the maintenance of the vehicle for the rest of the time. And as you quite rightly said at the introduction, for your questions, the ultimate thing here is public safety. So we just want some reassurances where vehicles are being presented and it doesn't appear that they're being properly maintained. We would like to have access to those records.
Yeah.
So actually, it's only while the vehicle is being licensed. We're not going to ask
Yeah.
people buying vehicles to produce the service records for the previous 5 years when they weren't the owner.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking, I want to clarify that this is a very important point because sometimes licensed vehicles are sold from one individual to the other. The individual that owns it keeps all the records. The new owner would not have that because he sent it to the taxman. That, you obviously claim all your repairs, all your service things to the tax, yeah? And you gave it to your accountant. It stays there until the taxman agrees that this is, the true record of your expenses, yeah? So it is totally unnecessary, totally, that only when the vehicle that individual has got, from the day he's got the license transferred to his name, then he should have some record of any garage that he gets repaired is some sort of record that it's been regularly serviced.
Yeah.
Is that what we are?
I'm happy to make
agreeing?
that
Because
clear. In
I'm
fact,
asking
I think
members
I did offer
to
that
make it
when we
clear
were going through this.
that members will not agree. Oh, I'm not speaking for all of them. For myself, I will not agree to that if it was expected that the vehicle, when it's sold, you have to have a previous record of that vehicle service record. Yep.
Yeah, certainly, councillor. I think I've hopefully, reappraised that position for you this evening. So it is whilst that vehicle is licensed with Luton Borough Council.
Yeah.
And that the owner at that time is then responsible. We wouldn't expect them to have to go retrospectively back. So I'm more than happy to make sure that the policy reflects that. And obviously, as part of your deliberations this evening, if you're happy for me to do that, then I will do that.
Yep.
Can
Do you
I,
have something further to say?
sorry?
Do you have some more?
Quite a
Okay.
few.
Okay,
Unless
that's fine.
somebody is desperate to ask, then, please, I'll
That's,
pass the buck over.
yeah, you have a question.
Yes, I have.
And then I'll come back to you if that's okay, because I think councillor Ajisola has a question,
Yes,
and then
cool,
I'll come back to
cool.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hussain, which as well, Mr. Tony. Thank you for the report, and of course, the upgrade on the policy, which is well overdue as well. I just want to say, is it paragraph 9, 10, which was you mentioned that it's been Lutonized. So I think some of it, Councillor Hussain has mentioned some areas that need to be Lutonized well, because there's one thing that I've observed with taxi as well, which members of the public have mentioned to me, is the language side of things, the communication between some taxi drivers and, of course, the person they are carrying. So it's about 210 pages, the policy, and I don't know how much more you're going to help the drivers with the language proficiency to educate them more on this policy, and of course our drivers to make them not all of them, but at least some still told me the communication is still a barrier between them. When they carry them, they can't understand what they're saying, or they don't understand this and that. Just one way how we can help them. That's just the question I have. Thank you.
No, certainly, if I could respond to that, because as you'll see with the statutory standards, there's provisions in there in regards to language proficiency. So whilst we haven't specified the requirements specifically in the policy, we can make those arrangements separately, and we can have, so for instance, I have already reached out to sort of the skills team to see what provisions. But I think we've certain members I've had conversations. We'd be looking at something around the ESOL type structure to make sure that there's that baseline provisions. Also, there's probably certain elements that we can have within the existing processes, which then just reaffirm those provisions. Very conscious, obviously, the size of the document, unfortunately, it is what it is. We've tried to keep it to an absolute minimum, but we've tried to make it as plain as possible, which is why we've had this drafted by one of the leading licensing solicitors for taxi and private hire law and legislation. So I'm hoping a combination of that will certainly help across a range of the language understanding and also language proficiency.
Back to you, councillor Hussain. Thanks.
Come back to you, Tony. In terms of the but we're talking about the tinted windows. I mean, that, my understanding is that that is something that majority of us would like to have a manufactured tinted window. And that
What
will,
we put in.
that will be acceptable and I would recommend to the committee that we will go for the manufacturer's tinted window, what is being proposed, yeah?
So just to confirm, that's exactly how we've written the condition. As I've indicated, there is a bit of a cut-off between those really dark tints that would be for the policy that is already in existence regards to executive vehicles. But basically, what the council across the broad spectrum of the provisions for licensing will accept any manufactured vehicle tint for private hire vehicles.
So in the other words, the Hackney carriage is totally different manufacturers. I'm not too sure if manufacturers do tinted windows on Hackney carriages.
Hackney carriages, certainly for us, obviously not necessarily in every authority area, but we have a fully accessible, 100% accessible policy for Hackney carriages, which means they're either purpose-built, which means they'll be built to those standards, or converted to those standards. So we don't have the same issue with Hackney carriages that we do for private hire, which in effect they're looking to buy a normal standard saloon vehicle off the street with whatever tints are already fitted to that vehicle. So no, and also Hackney carriages are formally public service vehicles.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that if a vehicle in Hackney carriages, you know, one of those Mercedes or whatever it is, does have a tinted window, it should come to the same standard as a manufacturer. That's what we are doing.
It would be to the converted or manufactured provisions for the council. So basically, we don't allow dark tints on Hackney carriages because they are built specifically to meet the conditions. So, and most Hackney carriages, when they are produced, do not have a high level of tint. They might have a low level of tint, like you see on the front, before the B pillar. But the consultation was very clear that the provisions for tinted windows was regards to private hire vehicles.
Right. Okay. Can we now come to the other bit that we're talking about, the penalty side of it? Yeah. Now, in terms of the totting up, I was looking at these, you know, your points of 12 and all that. Normally, for speeding offences these days with the 20 miles, you can pick them up very quickly, probably in 18 months rather than 18 years, like the old days. Because 20 miles is very difficult, particularly in London. Myself, I find it very difficult to go through some of the areas for an hour with a journey that took me 20 minutes. So in that sense, when you get a 12-month ban, but 3 years, your license is clean. You know, why is it that we can't let the drivers not apply for a license after 3 years? Why do we need to add on another 5 years so they can't apply for 8 years?
Right, that's again is sorry, I thought you were talking about penalty point scheme. What you're talking about is the DVLA points on the license. That is in line with the statutory standards. That is now the national recommendation, and we are bringing our provisions in line with that, which actually doesn't significantly change from where we are now, but it is the statutory standards. They are, you know, they're not just guidance, they are statutory requirements now moving forward. So it'll be the same here. I'm trying to establish whether Central Beds have moved to the new standards as well, but certainly Bedford are, Buckinghamshire already has, Cambridgeshire has, or South Cambridgeshire has. So actually lots of authorities are always in the process of adopting these standards, which are obviously being recommended by the government. Or we are already expecting national licensing framework because that's in the English devolution bill. So that again will be bringing in those minimum standards across the taxi and private hire industry. So basically in answer, it's what's in the statutory standards.
Right, because I need to understand, you get your license to drive even a lorry after 3 years. Yeah? But you can't drive a public service, or you can drive a coach as well, which carries people as well, doesn't it?
I don't know about the coaches, to be honest with you, because obviously that would probably depend down to which particular operator. But yeah, under the DVLA license, say we don't impact on the DVLA license. It is down to the council's policy on this, which was obviously in line with the statutory standards. I don't know if there's an equivalent for the coach industry or not.
I'd need to get a more clarification. So I would say that if it's a statutory, it should be statutory. Anybody who carries a member of public, not just a taxi driver, coach driver, or other vehicle, bus drivers. So it should be equal for all of them if it is statutory. So until we get a clarification, would I say that we can look at it and bring it back?
Are we able
I think
to
that's probably a question for the Ministry of Transport, I'm afraid. It's not something that we have control of. As I say, it's within the statutory standards.
No.
But
is
yeah,
this something that can be looked into?
I can certainly raise through the various institutes, etc. I can certainly find out.
Please.
I'm more than happy to feedback on that point.
Please, yeah, that'd be, yeah. I
Because
think,
this is something that is a serious concern because public service is a public service, whether you're a bus driver, coach driver, or a taxi driver. Yeah.
I think yeah, that makes sense to me. So if that can be looked into and brought back, I guess, is that?
Yeah, as I say, obviously probably outside of this process, but more than happy to feedback. And obviously if there is representations that then want to be made by the council with regards to the other areas of public service transportation, then we can probably do that. That'd probably go through somebody like Anthony Swift, I would imagine, with regards to the transport side. But I'm more than happy to make those inquiries and feedback to you, Chair.
Yeah, and it'd be also helpful that what we're discussing, when members take a vote on it, that this is all brought back to us, so we know, we clearly understand what the conditions are. Yeah, and as to your concern in terms of the changes to delegated powers, it allows for individual, if they are not satisfied, to the members' appeal to go to the members of this committee to look at that, isn't it?
The committee would be set up, it's the same as it is now. So basically, if there is an item that is contentious, or there's an item where the head of service does not feel that they can make that decision, it then goes to a committee. There is no members' appeal process. It's literally, once the decision has been made by the council, whether that's committee or an officer, then the appeals process is to magistrates. That's the law.
Yeah, that's what in the Constitution I'm talking about, in the Constitution, because we can make the delegated power to the Constitution. As a chair of the Constitution, I will be taking one of these agenda items to that, in that sense, in terms of delegated power.
Yes, the delegation powers are in the Constitution.
Yeah, okay. Right. I think I'm finished a few of them. I've got a few more, but other members have it.
Thank
More-
you.
more
Thank you. How
info.
kind of you. So, Councillor Nasser.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to go back. You mentioned about any vehicle are written off, they are not to be licensable. But there are many, in these days, if we see new cars, they are written off because of the just the body damage sometimes. And then people are falling for these things. So if they are drivable and if, even the insurance company does know which vehicles are able to drive, so that they are, some categories are not able to, even the insurance doesn't, from some of categories, I'm not sure which one, but there are. So in that case, if so why are we saying all vehicles? So that means we're giving the taxi drivers, the limited choice, and also it's very expensive to buy, a proper vehicle in these days.
I thought, unfortunately, the issue with written-off vehicles becomes more and more complex. We've been trying to deal with one recently where actually it's no longer just about the structural damage to the vehicles. So even with body damage, with all the electronics now that are associated with these vehicles and the sensors and all that side of things, that's predominantly why a lot of the vehicles now, well, apart from storage is the other major cost for people. But basically the vehicles are now so complex, and the fact that actually to get those tested to a suitable standard is actually financially unviable it is far simpler to have the baseline where actually for public safety, so that these vehicles are fully still to the manufacturer's specification. It is far better to say that actually we don't accept those vehicles that have been written off, because they've been written off for a reason at the end of the day.
Yeah, that I mean, I understand what you're saying. That if it's an electric vehicle, of course, I mean, there is no way, we know what's going on inside. But I'm talking about not electric ones.
As I say, it's so difficult now between the different standards. They keep changing them as well. So the problem is because there's such minor damage or apparently minor damage can be a real problem for those newer vehicles. You used to be able to bash out the panel on the front of your car or whatever, and it'd probably be fine. But nowadays, the technology that's actually integral to these vehicles is significant. So actually, we are putting people at risk if we cannot be and we can't be certain. I think it's the short answer. If a vehicle has been written off, we cannot be certain that the vehicle still meets the manufacturer's specifications. It may look okay, for the untrained eye, but we don't have the specialisms for it to be able to check it. And actually to find companies that can actually check it now to those is extremely expensive, which then counteracts any provisions regards to the fact that they've been able to find a cheaper vehicle.
Thank you. I have Councillor Keynes next. Councillor Mead, sorry, not Keynes. They rhyme, so I think it's an easy mistake to make. They both rhyme, but Councillor Mead, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just after a bit of clarification, I've been asked to get this clarified. To me, I can't see where the confusion is, but it's on page 182, paragraph 6.56. Not point, dot. We're not talking decimals. We're not doing hard sums. It's a dot. Where are we getting them? Right, have you got it?
To do with the maintenance and service, is that correct?
That's it. What they've asked, do they have to, let me get this, on first application and then on every renewal after the license. What they seem to think that they got to get it serviced on when they apply for a renewal of the license.
So that comes back to what we were talking earlier. Actually, this is to do with the fact that if a vehicle isn't being maintained, or we think that a vehicle isn't being maintained to a suitable standard because actually it's failing these tests regularly, that we get the opportunity to be able to inspect those records to make sure that it is being maintained.
So they have to get.
So in line with any of your own private vehicle, I'm certain you must do probably an annual service on that vehicle, or get somebody to come and do the annual. It's just that. It's literally just that.
Yes.
But of course, these vehicles are doing a lot of miles, so probably would be serviced more regularly, given the amount of time that they're being driven, and also the mileage that they are conducting.
I'm even more confused.
Two separate elements. One is the test that we conduct. So the certificate of compliance is with regards to all of the key safety points. We don't look at necessarily the body. So if there's a chip or a number of chips in the body panels or bits and pieces like that, they're an advisory. They will come to licensing to say actually it needs to be maintained to a suitable standard, and they get an opportunity to make those repairs. But all the safety provisions are tested on its certificates compliance. It has those tests every 6 months. But as you would do with changing your oil and doing your brake pads and all that, it's those bits that we would want to see if requested, that we would want them to produce those to show that the vehicle is being properly maintained. Does that make sense? Sorry, Councillor. Your manufact.
Talk about the renewal of the license.
It's annual. Yeah, the renewal of the license is annually. So we would expect in normal circumstances, unless the manufacturer says, oh, well, actually it's, I don't know, 60,000 miles or 3 years, then that's what we would look for.
So what are you just looking for them to have the stamp in the book saying that
Yes.
the tests have been done?
Yes, in line.
Have to have a test specially done.
No.
because they're renewing.
No. Our test is specific.
Yeah.
It's just the normal service. So if your vehicle says it needs to have a minor service every year or every 20,000 miles, that's all we want. That's all. We were just wanting that vehicle to be maintained as it is, not required to be, but the manufacturer would expect it to be maintained.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. Got it right this time. Councillor Rahana Malik.
I have a question regarding if the drivers have 12 points and they have to wait for 6 to 12 months as in ban, and after that 3 to 5 years license which will be. Is there any possibility to be relicensed? How long is the time period to be there?
It will depend on the reason what. Yeah, I suppose it depends on. Are you looking at a particular point there, Councillor? Sorry, which point is that? Can I look to refer?
Are banned for 6 to 12 months if they have a points.
Oh, the tossing up for the 12 points. Yeah, so basically that again is in line with the statutory standards. So the provisions for the fitness and convictions policy is taken from the statutory standards. So basically once that the time period starts from the date of conviction, or the date whichever is the latest, the date of conviction or the date of offence. So basically that time period starts from that date. After that time has elapsed, then they can, they can apply at any time, but it's considered against the policy. After that point, those matters would be, let's call it spent.
The 3 years waiting point to be relicensing at 3 to 5, is that a valid for them because they have they have the only one thing? Is there any way to be reduce this period? They can go back to work?
As I say, they can apply at any time, but we would consider that against this policy, which is based on the statutory standards. So if you're asking whether we would be, looking to reduce that, then no.
Any further questions? Councillor Hussain.
I ask you, in terms of the DBS, you said cost is important, but more important is that it takes so long now for the DBS to come back that drivers are sometimes 3 to 4 months waiting for it to come. So I would suggest that if members are in support of it, that it is brought in-house. Because when it was in-house, at least it was more efficient and you knew exactly how long it's taken.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I have to push back on that. It really wasn't. So when the council did it, it was a manual process using manual paperwork. We were accepting applications. It's not the delay. We are not the experts anymore. This has now become so difficult and complex, and we don't have the systems to be able to keep tabs on the update service. So actually, as I say, it's probably a conversation outside this room for another day. But for us to bring it in-house, we would have to recruit more staff. We would have to contract for that service, and that would have to then be implemented, and I would have to say would delay the process for getting a license. The key provision for the update service is that those delays, which are sometimes being experienced now, would be significantly reduced. And I say significantly reduced, I won't say eradicated, because actually there are probably going to be some people that don't maintain the update service. So if I can explain, maybe just for, if you allow me, Chair. So basically the update service means that once you get your first DBS certificate, You keep that certificate and then you sign up to the update service. So you make a payment every 12 months just to keep that certificate live. By doing that, it enables that you in effect have a live record, and the licensing authority can then go and check that record every 6 months. And that can happen all the way through. So as long as you maintain that payment, which is also works out cheaper in the long run. So actually the fees, I can find the details in a minute if you like me to, but basically it's certainly cheaper than having to do a DBS every 3 years. So it's cheaper for the drivers, and actually it gives the licensing authority the ability to be able to check every 6 months. It also means that renewal, we are not dependent on issues around disclosures from the police, which means that they could take 12 weeks. Actually, that is always live. We can just have the access, we can go and do the check, and it's done. We don't have to wait for the DBS. The driver doesn't have to wait for the DBS because we don't get to see the DBSs anymore. Because previously, for the times that you were referring to, driver used to get a certificate, we used to get a certificate. That is all gone. We wouldn't get to see the certificates. So actually, there's a whole range of issues. So actually, increase in costs, increase in time and administration, and also the fact that we wouldn't be able to then do the update, and then drivers would also not benefit from being able to use the update service. So actually, with the mandatory provisions to adopt that service, I would say that the majority, and I'll say again, as long as they keep it in place, we will not have some of the problems that has been raised with members certainly over the last 6 months.
So would that be paid in advance? My understanding is anything that makes it efficient, whether it's the updating service is more efficient as well as it cut the cost. That would be the more suitable, because right at the beginning, before I asked you the questions, I'm aware of the cost to the drivers.
Yes.
Because these days, with the cost of living,
This would keep the costs down. Yeah. If we were to bring it in-house, the costs would go up.
Yes, I think every member of this room will be in support of it. That's what I'm looking for. And efficiency, because if somebody is out for 3 or 4 months with a family, right, out of work, for a self-employed person, does not get any state help immediately, as you understand. It is more difficult for them, those that are self-employed.
This provision would significantly help.
Yeah, okay.
We do have an awful lot. We actually did had a meeting today with the provider, and actually there is a significant number of drivers that already have the update service. In fact, we were quite surprised about how many. So actually, it's probably just a little bit more of a channel shift to be able to get the rest of the drivers to move across. But it will pretty much eradicate that whole issue you get at renewal, because actually it's a live access. You can just do a check at that time. You haven't got to wait for a new certificate. So actually, what you would want for the drivers would be delivered through this, rather than having to internalize it, which would actually be completely the opposite, probably what you'd want.
Yeah. So when they're applying for it, you've already got the updated one or something.
We can access it online.
You don't need to wait for them to send you the thing.
So the closest example I can give you is, you can get the code for your driving license. So you want to hire a vehicle or whatever, you can now give a code for the hire or the rental company to access your driving license. It's exactly that. It's a live access. You haven't got to run down and produce your driving license at the desk. That they can access it straight away. This is exactly the same, but for the DBS. Basically, it's a live access. You have access to it. The licensing authority has access to it. We can make that check live at the time of renewal.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's all. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so in that case, are members happy with the report as it is?
Yeah, I think what I propose is that those amendments that once it is been agreed here, we like to see them back here again, just to make sure that we are satisfied that this is what we have suggested tonight, and some of the things we've suggested, that it is what we are, rather than some sort of something new that once it's completely adopted and it's interpreted completely different to what the members are saying. Yeah? Yeah, I'd rather, be, it's in terms of the member of the public safety as well as the interest of the trade, that it is very clear what we agreed.
So what are you suggesting then?
What I'm suggesting that he comes back here and we look at it all in writing, the amendments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And did you second that, Councillor Nass? Okay. So I think in that case, Tony, I don't think that's been approved. Maybe I think that's any comments that were made and suggestions. I think if those are included within the report and brought back.
Certainly, Chair. I mean, I suppose the other way of doing it is if those comments are noted and recorded within the minutes of the meeting, they can be put into the document. And I mean, I know that there are powers within the chair and vice chair of this committee to approve, rather than necessarily having to bring it back. I mean, that might be an option, and maybe Sam can advise on that. I don't know, or Marie can advise on that. Sorry, Sam, I'm picking on you because you happen to be at the front. But Marie might be able to advise on that. But obviously, just conscious that basically the majority of the report of the document will remain the same. Obviously, just picking up to make sure that what you've asked for is actually correctly reflected, so those can be brought to you as chair and vice chair. Maybe, I don't know. Just thinking about your time and.
Chair, yeah, thank you, Tony. I can certainly include them in the minutes. I'm just not sure about the chair and vice chair. I'd need to go back to and check and advise on that.
Chair, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking comes back to this committee, and then we approve. When we approve the minutes, we approve this is what we agreed. So I do not want to see any deviation to what we are suggesting and what is interpreted later on, because I am a little bit concerned, because not only the two things I said, public safety, and also it becomes a completely confused at what we agreed and what we said. And that's why I wanted to come at the next meeting of regulation. When we agree in the minutes, we can agree that we don't need to debate on it. We already agreed.
Okay, how do members feel about that then, that suggestion?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think if it comes back to the group, the committee, rather than just chair and vice chair, because that is what majority of the committee would like. Is that all right? Yeah. Thank you.
That's fine.
I'm going to go with
I'm
majority,
just.
so I don't want to take like.
Sorry, I was just very much aware that I know members have been put under a lot of pressure for things like tinted windows, etc., and that will obviously delay the introduction of those elements. That's also, I just know how much you get.
Yeah, I think because the majority of the committee wants to see that, so I think that's why I'll go with that.
I was thinking about there's another option, but no, absolutely. Obviously, I'll follow the direction of this committee, and we'll bring it back. But just know that you'll probably get some earache from it as well.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think the committee have made it clear that they would want to see this come back. So thank you, Tony. Thank you so much for your time and for the long line of questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Right. So the next item of agenda is item agenda 10. That's the gender pay gap 2025. And I believe, Helen, you are presenting this item?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I wonder if it would be possible to take all three of the pay gap reports, so that's the gender pay gap, ethnicity pay gap and disability pay gap reports together. The reasoning for that is that they all use the same methodology, they're all looking at the same metrics. And I've got a quick, if you're agreeable to that, I've got a few slides that I'd like to put up just to sort of talk through that.
Yes, that's fine if we take all the pay gap reports together, and also happy to have the slides put up.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just pop them up. Oh, excuse me a second while I. Sorry, just having a bit of a technical hitch here. Okay, right, you can say thanks. I'm there now. Apologies for the delay. The council's gender pay gap figures for 2025. I'm really pleased to be presenting some good news today. We have a continued positive trend on our gender pay gap, which moves us more towards gender pay equity. So for the first time since reporting began, both the mean and the median pay gap favours women, so at 1.5% and 2.5% respectively. You can see from the chart there that women now earn slightly more than men on average in the council, and that reflects some wider progress in representation across our mid-tier and our higher paid roles. Importantly, this shift towards women being paid slightly more doesn't indicate an overcorrection from the position that we were in several years ago, but it does show that our approaches to pay and progression and flexible working are having the intended impact. The data also compares very favourably to the external marketplace. So you can see there that we have a pay gap that favours women in the private sector, the rest of the public sector nationally, and non-profits. They're all showing much bigger pay gaps, and they're all favouring males. So we compare very favourably. And underneath that, you'll see that the continued positive trend towards pay equity can be seen in those trend charts. So in 2017, which is when we started reporting our gender pay gap, we were sitting at 8.3% as our pay gap in favour of males for the mean, and for the median it was 13.3%. And over the years that we've been reporting it, that has gradually come down on those trends. The report highlights the key factors that have influenced this year's movement. Specifically, we have had more women appointed to roles above the median. We've had some structural changes in some of our pay structures, so specifically the Salisbury pay recalibration. And we've also had the return of the Civica cohort, which has reshaped our sort of quartile distributions. We also have to report on our gender bonus gap. This is essentially looking at our market supplements. Not a huge amount to say about this. It continues to favour women, and it favours women really because it reflects the makeup of the roles that receive market supplement, that being the only bonus that we really pay. So moving on to our ethnicity pay gap. We use the same data that we capture for gender pay gap. Instead of comparing males and females, we're comparing the two main ethnicity categories for the workforce, those being white and colleagues with ethnically diverse backgrounds, also referred to as global majority. So the headline figure here, the headline position, shows a mean pay gap of 6.2% and a median gap of 5.7%, both in favour of white employees. And as you can see on the slide, what that means in terms of pay differentials between those two groups. The important thing to say about that is that the pay gap, both the mean and the median pay gap, have narrowed since 2023. So we are on a continuing positive downward trend for that. The gap is not the result of unequal pay for equal work. We've had equal pay audits that have confirmed that. Instead, it just really reflects the workforce distribution, with colleagues from ethnically diverse and global majority backgrounds still underrepresented in some of our higher graded roles, particularly our M1 to M5 grades, whilst at M6 and above, the gap is being closed. A key caveat to the data that you're looking at is the completeness of the data. At the snapshot date at which we looked at this, there was 16% of employees who had no recorded ethnicity. So that limits the accuracy of the data that we're looking at. We have, thanks to some recent work, managed to close that gap to below 10%. So next year we would expect a much more reliable picture in terms of reporting. On bonuses, the gap is actually in favour of our ethnically diverse colleagues. And again, that's due in the main to the fact that our market supplement payments are within our sort of social care cohort, and it's to do with the makeup of the people within the that cohort. Finally, on our ethnicity pay gap, the report summarises that you've got in front of you, summarises the extensive work that's been undertaken on the people strategy and the various ED&I actions that are underway, things like recruiting for potential, creating clearer career pathways, strengthening ED&I leadership, having ED&I coordinators embedded, and launching new staff networks. All of those things go to address representation and support long-term change within the workforce. Moving on again, this is the second year that we have voluntarily reported our disability pay gap. So as yet, we don't really have any reliable trend data. Oh, my apologies, I forgot to show that slide. That's the trend data for the ethnicity pay gap, just showing the positive downward trend there. Yes, so we don't really have any trend data on disability pay gap, but the headline finding is that there is currently no pay disadvantage for disabled employees within the council. In fact, both the mean and the median pay gaps favour our disabled staff by 1.4% and 2.5% respectively. And similarly, our bonus gap also favours disabled employees. And the key reason for that, it's a narrow and it's a positive gap, is the consistent distribution of disabled employees across all of our pay quartiles. And the representation within those pay quartiles broadly matches the workforce as a whole, which is why there's a very narrow gap there. The report highlights two important caveats. Firstly, almost 20% of our employees haven't provided us with any disability information. So that limits the reliability of our data sets, and that's something that we're currently addressing. Secondly, the quality of some of the disability declarations that we do have is unclear. We don't know whether, because people self-report, we don't know whether what they're self-reporting actually meets the legal definition of disability. And finally, the report emphasises the need to improve our data confidence and data collection, and also to build on initiatives that we have implemented fairly recently, things like workplace adjustment passports that were brought in last year, our mental health first aider network that was brought in last year, and activity via our staff networks. So to finish off on these three reports, the committee is asked simply to note the progress in the ongoing work on the ethnicity pay gap and the disability pay gap. They're not mandatory reports, but they're likely to be mandatory reports within the next couple of years. That's coming down the line. We do, however, have a statutory duty to publish our gender pay gap data by the 30th of March this year. So committees asked to note the gender pay gap figures and endorse them for submission to full council on the 17th of March. I'm happy to answer or try and answer any questions that you've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Two members have questions. Councillor Hussain.
Can I ask you, I mean, it's good news in terms of the gender pay gap because most of the social workers are getting market supplements, so that has made a huge difference in terms of those, in terms of the female, But my disappointment really is that we still got these a major difference in terms of the ethnicity pay gap because we don't have to have senior people, in the grades that you mentioned and 5 or whatever like that. And that is something that I want to know, that what do we have a target? how do we want to see that to change in the next few years? But Luton is a very diverse town, and that ethnic minority is the majority. There's 52% of the people in this town are from ethnic minority.
Thank you, Councillor. There are targets around the BLMK movement and around the ethnicity of our senior people, and they were, I think I've got them here somewhere, but we're actually doing quite well in relation to those. If you bear with me, I'll try and dig those out. But in fact, I have them here. I brought them with me, so let me just see if I can. So we do have a target to increase the workforce from ethnic minority backgrounds to 36% by March 2026, and we are now at 42%. Is that right? I'm looking.
Yeah.
Yep. And the target for 26-27 has increased again, so it goes up to 38% of people with an ethnic minority background. And the rationale behind that is to try and get to a position where we are emulating within our own workforce. We're reflecting the makeup of the community that we serve. So there's these targets that are moving towards that year on year.
But my concern is in terms of the senior posts, we are not making progress. That's where the gap in the numbers in lower grades, where you can be, either care workers or very sort of in kitchen staff or, a learning support assistant, the teaching assistant, and that number will give. But how many are in a very senior post, be that may in the school, head teachers, FTED teachers, or in councils, senior managers? This is what I'm specifically talking about. That.
I don't know if it's helpful. I can see Kate's got her hand up there on the screen. I don't know if you want to come in, Kate.
Yeah, Kate, if you come in.
Thank you, everybody. So basically, just two things really. One, this is obviously just council employees. It excludes school employees. So just for the point of clarification. In terms of our council workforce, we have a target to increase a diverse representation among our senior leaders, which is graded M6 and above. So each year we aim to increase that by 2%. As of this year, as of January 2026, we had a target of 26% of our M6 and above leaders being from ethnically diverse backgrounds, and we achieved that this year. I think we came out at 26.5%. Obviously, there is a lot of work that we still need to do to make sure that our senior leadership diversity is the same as our wider workforce, which, as Helen was saying, is now over 40%. But there is a lot happening in two key areas. One is around our recruitment processes and making sure that they are inclusive, and that we recruit for potential and that there's no bias. The second element is around also focusing on our internal progression. And making sure that and so we have a number of schemes aimed at supporting our employees to progress. We've just within the last year we've launched a aspiring and sort of middle management leadership program, and that's all aimed at trying to ensure that as much as possible we do have those progression pathways up into leadership roles. As well as that inclusive recruitment approach.
Thanks, Kate. Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, appreciated that we are reaching the target. What I'm saying is that, we're doing very well in terms of our school. We're good, outstanding. Our results for those children from deprived background and the pupil premium are doing excellent. Even the Secretary of State recognize the progress that Luton is making, well above the national average. That's what I would like to see happening also in the terms of the council, with direct employee of the council, that we are an example to places like Slough or Leicester and other towns. Yeah, so that's what I'm hoping that we're able to achieve those sort of targets. And thank you very much. I know you're doing your best, but I think we need to be a bit more ambitious.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Do any other members have questions? No, I think the committee notes, not I think, but I know the committee notes these pay gap reports, so thank you so much. And I think the pay policy statement is also being presented by yourselves.
It is, thank you very much indeed. A brief report, Chair. The report just reminds the committee of our statutory duty under the Localism Act to publish a pay policy statement each year by the 31st of March. The appendix to your report is the pay policy statement for 2026-27, and it sets out how we determine pay across the organisation, covering chief officers through to our lowest paid employees and the relationship between the two. And that's really to ensure fairness and transparency and compliance with national guidance. So this year's statement includes several important updates. Those are itemised in the report, and they include structural changes to the national NJC pay spine, the adoption of the real living wage rates from April 2026, some updates to senior management job titles, and some pay ratio information following changes to senior leadership. It also highlights some forthcoming legislative changes that we're going to require to update our policies on. So on this particular report, the committee is simply asked to note our statutory responsibilities, to agree the 26-27 statement, and to recommend it to full council on the 17th of March. But as in previous years, we're also seeking approval to update specific sections once national pay settlements are confirmed, so that we can keep the statement current and up to date throughout the year without the need to refer to the committee until the next full annual review. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Do members have questions? No? Again, that's noted. So did you have a question? Oh, yeah, that's noted. And then the next report, proposal to extend NJC pay scale and introduce an additional grade, again, by yourself. So please, go ahead.
Thank you. The report proposes the introduction of a new M9 grade at the top of the NJC pay scale. The aim is to give us the flexibility that we currently lack for roles that are demonstrably more complex than those sitting at the top of our existing pay spine, which is graded M8, but where they don't meet the threshold for service director. So as I say, the current top grade in our NJC pay scale is M8, and that sits nearly £14,000 below the entry point for our Service Director 1 grade. We've got very few Service Director 1s. Nearly all of our Service Directors are in the Service Director 2 grade, and that increases the gap between the top of the NJC pay spine and the Service Directors still further. Benchmarking that we've undertaken shows that we're significantly less competitive than many of our neighbouring authorities and also than London authorities. And that gap is contributing to recruitment and retention difficulties. And you might have seen in the report, there's evidence of that with a very recent complex high-level M8 role that we were trying to recruit to. M9 would be used very sparingly, only where job evaluation clearly evidences greater scope and strategic responsibility. It provides a development bridge towards service director roles, and it also supports stronger leadership capacity across the organisation. There are financial risks, particularly what we term grade creep, where there's a sort of push on the M9s and a push on the pay structure upwards, and that will require firm governance. And also there is no additional budget for this, so any roles that are graded at M9 would have to be accommodated within existing budgets. Trade unions have been consulted. We've had several quite lengthy discussions with them around this proposal, and we have agreed a number of actions to support the sort of wider pay and job evaluation, job description work around this. So overall, option A in your report, which recommends introducing grade M9, offers a targeted and proportionate way to address the current gaps and strengthen the council's ability to recruit and retain our senior talent. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions from members? Councillor Hussain, comment, is it?
Question is comment really. I think it's time we've done that because we're comparable authority not very far from here, often slightly above us. And we attracting the right candidates for this. I think we could have done that sometime because we are traveling more leading people to even our neighbouring authorities.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. No further comments or questions? No. So I think I'm happy to go with the recommendation. So yeah, we'll go with option A.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, so I think that relieves you of your duties tonight. We're moving on to our draft committee work programme. Do members have any comments, questions, or any queries on that? The next meeting date is for the 23rd of March. Yeah, we're happy with that?
Yeah.
Cool, I think we're happy with that. So that concludes, no, do I have to?
No.
Okay, that concludes tonight's business. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.